Nuts and bolts with Tone here, guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2008 6.4 Powerstroke. Surprise! I think I'm the only one in America that works on 6.4s. You know, got to keep these old dinosaurs on the road. This one came in with a puking oil leak. Let's take a look. So you see all the way back here to the differential. This thing is absolutely engulfed in oil. Now, pretty sure the differential is leaking from the pinion seal. However, this is not from the differential. Look at that. Look at the amount of oil. Look at the exhaust. Look at the fuel tank. This one came in with a customer concern of oil leak, transmission leak, and differential leak. So now we'll make our way forward. So look at the DPF. Completely engulfed in oil. Transfer case. Now if you notice, right here, there's not a whole lot of oil on that side of the engine, but when you come over here on the passenger side, there is a ton of oil. You come all the way here, look at the suspension, everything. So what's leaking is, there is a PCV, you can see that elbow right there. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. Let's see how it focuses. Okay. So there's an elbow right there, and that is your PCV hose that goes up to your oil separator. So you can see that hose is right there. These are transmission cooler lines, and that's the PCV hose. It goes up behind all the accessories. I'll show you once we get this thing down, but we're gonna be replacing that hose, and this also has leaking valve cover gaskets. So we're gonna reseal the valve covers, replace that PCV hose, and get this thing back on the road. Let's get going. During this job, you're gonna see I have a lot of stuff out that you don't actually have to have out. The front of that compressor looks awfully weird. That's because when it came in, I was doing a visual, and the compressor clutch is supposed to sit like this, and it was sitting back and like that. It wasn't even attached. So I'm actually doing a compressor and accumulator and an orifice tube, so you'll see I have more stuff disconnected. But yeah, pretty crazy.
So we're going to take the fan shroud out. You're going to have an 8 milli bolt on the top, an 8 milli bolt down below. These are always broken right here because nobody ever disconnects them properly to take them out. You're going to have another 8 there, another 8 down there. And your power steering reservoir is going to slide into a channel, and you're going to have 2 bolts. One of them is always a 10, I swear. I'm not sure why, but they're always mismatched. Then you're going to take your coolant hose right here and pop it out of the reservoir. Makes it easier to maneuver. You're going to disconnect your 2 coolant hoses that go to the turbo and the fuel cooler. You're also going to disconnect your upper radiator hose. It's going to be a clip. You're going to take it off, slide the hose off. When you put it back together, you want to make sure you lube up the O-ring on the inside of the hose. Or you can get a seal kit for the inside of the hose to reseal it.
So once you get for the fan clutch, once you get your fan shroud out of the way, all right, what you want to do, you're going to disconnect your connector right here, pull your connector through. You're going to have 2 tabs right there, one on each side. Push those in, and then this portion, the electrical portion, pushes through. You're going to take a tool and break the fan clutch loose. Now this is left-hand threads, meaning that you go right to loosen it. And what I use is a air hammer attachment. You're going to have this right here, which is I don't even know what size this is because I don't ever even look at the size. I just have written on there that it's for a 6.0 and a 6.4. 1 inch and 7/8 tool. So once you break it loose, don't take it off yet. You're gonna come up here and you're gonna have 2 13s here, a 13 there, and the same thing on this side. You're gonna take all those bolts out because you're gonna pull this forward like this. And that will allow you the room to get your fan clutch out between the cooling fan stator and the radiator, and it will slip out. Then you're gonna have 2 nuts on the top and 2 bolts at the bottom that bolt this thing in. You're gonna go ahead and take this out. Now to get this out, you also need this loose. Another thing that helps is if you go ahead and loosen up both ends of your charge air pipe, it gives you more room to move this thing around. And the same thing over here. Go ahead and loosen up both sides. It just gives you more room, and it allows you a whole lot more freedom to pull this forward to get this out. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting this. Once you figure this part out and get this pulled out, then this comes out no problem. So anyway, so we're down to the valve cover here. So for this air box, all you have to do is undo this 115, undo the mass airflow connector, and undo the connector for the air filter minder. And then you just yank this air box like that, and the whole air box pops out as one assembly. And you get that out. The next thing we're gonna do over here is we're gonna undo the 15, the 8 milli right there on the front of the turbo. And then you have 4 8s that bolt this oil separator down. We're gonna disconnect that, and then this is the other end of that hose that we're gonna be replacing. So you gotta take that off. So go ahead and slide the clamp off and pop the hose back and get this off. And when you set it down, be careful, it's gonna oil, a lot of oil is gonna drain out of this thing. I'm replacing that as well. So now if you move over to this side, you need to take the degas bottle out, and the degas bottle has a hose right there. So you gotta take this clip out, these hoses here for your turbo. Go ahead and disconnect those. Get those out of the way. Pop your clip for your upper radiator hose so that it can move out of the way to get this degas bottle out. Disconnect your batteries. Take out, there's 2 13s that go straight down and 2 13s that go this way. Once you do that, you're gonna have another little hose, this little guy right here that goes to the front. And if it's 4-wheel drive, you're gonna have vacuum lines you have to disconnect. And then this whole degas bottle comes out as one assembly. Oh yeah, drain your coolant first. The next thing we're gonna do on this side, so that's all I've done so far as the valve covers are concerned. So for the driver's side, we gotta get the fuel cooler out of the way. So you're gonna have your 2 fuel lines here. It's gonna be 2 17mm banjo bolts with a washer on top and on the bottom. So you're gonna undo both of those. You're gonna disconnect your connector for your VGT. This one looks like it's an aftermarket one. It's not the same as a Ford one. So anyway, so we're gonna disconnect that, and you're gonna unclip it from the bracket here. Your glow plug connector here is clipped into this bracket. You're gonna unclip that and push it down. You're gonna have a nut right here for your dipstick. And there's gonna be 3 nuts on these studs that go across here. You're gonna take those nuts off. You're gonna have a 10 there. And you're gonna have a 10 over here that goes through this back pressure sensor bracket and then through the fuel cooler. Also disconnect the connector for the exhaust back pressure sensor and unclip it from the sensor. Then you're gonna wanna go down there to the bottom, and on the top part of the nut, loosen that up so you can spin the sensor out of the way. You don't have to take it off. So we're gonna spin that out of the way. You're gonna disconnect your glow plug connectors, your connector here, because we're gonna be taking the glow plug harness out of the valve covers. There's also 2 10s in the bottom of the bracket. There's 2 brackets. So don't take these nuts out. These nuts right here, don't take them out, just loosen them up. The only one you have to take out is this front one here, because that bolts the dipstick to it. So you're gonna take that nut off, loosen all 3, and those 10s down there are gonna be like a big fat 10 with a big giant weighted washer, all attached. I'll show you when we get them off. And the other one is right behind this glow plug connector.
So now that the glow plug harness is out of the way, now you have a better view of what those 10s look like. There's going to be 2 of those in the bottom. There's going to be 1 on the front of the fuel cooler bracket. And then on the rear of the fuel cooler bracket where the exhaust back pressure sensor is, there's just a nut. Then you're going to come right here and you're going to disconnect. You're going to take a pry bar right there and you're going to pry the fuel cooler away from the turbo. This is just a U. The turbo comes in, it goes through the U and around. So this is where the turbo comes around and it connects the 2 turbos, and it's also a fuel cooler. You have coolant running through here, so there's coolant right there. Once you get the fuel cooler off, This is just a pipe that connects the two turbos. Now, no matter what anybody tells you, you always want to check the turbos, especially the high-speed turbo. I was told this had a brand new block, a brand new lower end, and a brand new turbo. All right, so let me see if I can do this. Now, all I have handy is a pry bar. Usually use a pocket screwdriver, but anyways, here with a pry bar, you can see that it looks like I could just pretty much snap that turbo impeller off. That is a lot of play. And you can't tell from the angle, but the impeller, the fins on the impeller are chewed up as well. Now, like I said, last visit I did glow plugs. They said this thing had a brand new block and a brand new turbo. That is no bueno. I had a 6.4 that came in with a misfire complaint and smoking, and I was pulling the fuel cooler off to remove the valve cover, and I found the high pressure turbo seized up with a ton of sludge. Had no codes, no lack of power issues, no complaints of that sort.
You can swing this exhaust back pressure sensor down because you loosened it up. And you want to notate all your bolts in case they fall out of where the studs are. So the studs are important. You want to draw a picture sometimes. I usually like to draw a picture so I don't forget, because as much as you think you'll remember, you'll forget.
So here's what the fuel cooler looks like from the engine side. So there's those 3 bolts right there. There's 3 nuts. I did not loosen those up at all. I just took out the 4 nuts that held it on as an assembly. Now these are the seals that seal the boost. This one seals it to that connecting pipe, and the other one seals directly to the turbo. These look good, so I'm not going to change them. Once you've got all your bolts loose, you're going to have the harness right here that comes up from the top side of the front of the valve cover. You're going to just kind of wiggle that around. You should be able to lift that up enough to get it out. Then you're going to have the rest of your wiring harness that goes up to your VGT and also to your back pressure sensor. And this plastic coolant pipe that's sticking there, be very careful. It's plastic. So let's see if I could do this one-handed. It's a little tricky sometimes to get out. With 2 hands, you can get it out no problem. Doing it one-handed must not have been too tricky because, well, just got it right out. Now, when you have the valve covers off, you want to do an inspection. So the way that the regen works on these things is that fuel gets in the oil and it wears out the rocker arms. There's a little nub on the end of the rocker arm. So that's the rocker arm right there. And it sits on this valve bridge. And the valve bridge operates two valves at the same time. And then that's where the rocker arm rides on the bridge itself. Now the nub of the rocker arms, they wear out and they eventually fall off and the clips fall off and then you end up with a misfire. So right there is where the nub of the rocker arm sits on the valve bridge. That's the valve bridge right there. It's really hard to look in a mirror and point with a screwdriver upside down and backwards. But anyways, you want to inspect that clearance there. That looks like it's about 3/16 of an inch, I think. And that looks like it's good. So it looks like when they did the lower end, they must have replaced the rocker arms because there's no way they'd look like that if they weren't replaced already. So while you're in here, if you do find very little clearance between your rocker arm and the valve bridge, then I strongly recommend you replace the rocker arms. To do that, you have to get 4 injector install kits because these high pressure fuel tubes that go from the rail to the injectors, they have to be replaced. You cannot reuse them. So what you're going to do is you're going to unclip the electrical from the injectors. Then you're going to undo that high pressure fuel line right there to the rail. You're going to take off all 4 of the high pressure fuel lines, unclip the electrical from the rail, remove the rail. There's 2 10s that hold it in. And then I'm going to put a link to a video right there on how to replace the rocker arms. There's 2 bolts per rocker arm. Now, once you're in here, let's say you're removing your rocker arms. You've got your rails out. You're removing your rocker arms. This is called the rocker box. It mounts to the cylinder head, and you have bolts inside. There's 2 bolts right there on the end. And then the bolts come across the bottom, and then they go along the top, but they're underneath the fuel rail. So if you get a Molly valve cover set, the rocker box gaskets come with it. Then we're going to go over to the passenger side, and you need to get the glow plug control module out. Well, it's got this little heat shield, this little like flimsy heat shield. It's going to be held on with these little retainers that just push down. So there's going to be one on each side of the glow plug module, and it just goes down on the stud, so you could just spin it off. You're going to undo the 210s for the glow plug module, disconnect the connectors, and then you're going to get this EGT connector disconnected and unclipped from the bracket. So once you do that, you're going to want to get this coolant hose disconnected. Be careful, it's plastic. So there's going to be a bolt right here on this end here by the pipe that holds the pipe in and the wiring harness to the bracket, and it bolts it down. You're going to remove that. Now I'm going to have the accumulator out of this thing because I'm doing AC as well, but you don't need to take the accumulator out. You also need to get your glow plug harness out of the valve cover and unclip from the main harness, and then you're just going to pop them out just like that. So you got to get the glow plug control module bracket out. Now it mounts in several places. So when you first start, you're going to come over here and you're going to have a keeper on each one of the studs that goes over the heat shield. Then there's also going to be a keeper on the stud in the back there. You're going to remove all that. You're going to take your nuts off for your glow plug control module. You're going to unclip it and get it off of there. Get your EGT sensor off. Now you're going to have a bolt on this side over here, but the connector that's right there, that is the high pressure fuel pump connector that clips onto the bracket. So you have to unclip that. Then you're going to have an 8 milli bolt here that bolts the hose through there. Then you're going to have a studded bolt that bolts through the back. But before you do that, once you take the heat shield off, you're going to have a ground that's going to be attached to that stud in the back of the engine valley, the part of the bracket that is the closest to the middle of the engine. And that's it right there. It goes there, and then you're going to have a stud on top. And then you got your 2 8s down there. You're going to remove those, and then you can get the whole bracket out of there. So you're going to have a nut on that stud right there for the transmission dipstick. You got to disconnect that. You're going to have another nut on this stud over here, and that's where the PCV hose clips on to the stud on the valve cover. So once you get that disconnected, you're going to have to lift your electrical up like this so you can gain access to the bolts and get all the bolts loose. The easiest way to remove these grommets is you take a pocket screwdriver and you slide it out just like that. And then you take a razor knife and you're just going to do a small little quick cut, and it should pop right off. Just be careful with that razor blade so you don't cut yourself. So once you get your valve covers clean and you get your gasket laid out, go ahead and partially pop it in. It's going to be sticking up like this. What I do is I have a little tiny hammer. It's got rubber on one side and plastic on the other. And I just take that and I just tap on the gasket and it puts it in the groove like it's supposed to be. I do this on water pumps, valve covers, just about anything that has a pressing gasket. Even if there's a plastic manifold, it still works really well. I also have this other roller thing that I use sometimes when the gasket's real big. But so we just went all the way around, and now the gasket's in the valve cover. I usually like to tip whatever it is that I put the gasket in up on its side and look at the gasket eye level just like that to make sure it's in all the way. Because if that gasket rolls when it's in the car, you're going to have a world of problems. And then you're going to put all your grommets, all your bolts with your grommets in. And now this is a valve cover set. It says Molly on there, but it's Victor Ryan's. I've never seen that on the same package before. Anyways, that doesn't matter. So you're going to roll this over. It's going to have rocker box gaskets. It's going to have valve cover gaskets. And it's going to have new grommets. That's why I like the Molly set. It even has the seals for the turbo if you were going to replace those seals for the fuel cooler. So pretty good set. So here's what I was talking about right here. I lay the engine out like that. I put an arrow pointing towards the front, and then I draw out where all the studs and all the bolts are. So I know that's the driver's side, and I flip it around, and that's the passenger side, and there's no confusion. I do this for intake manifolds too. With new grommets, you're just going to take the bolt and you're going to set it in, you're going to push it down, and it's going to pop in the hole and lock in just like that. Next up, you want to get your valve cover, your rocker box clean. I take Scotch-Brite pad and I cut them up into little rectangles, and I use brake clean and run it around, and I get everything really clean. And it's going to be 80 inch-pounds. So what I'm going to use is this brand new mini torque wrench. This is by Capri Tools. This just came out the past couple weeks. This thing has an awesome display screen. It's about 7 inches long. I mean, look at that display screen right there, 80 inch-pounds. That is easier to read than my snap-on torque wrench. So you just want to evenly torque the valve cover. You're going to want to do like the top one, then the bottom. I've already went around. I'm just double checking them all, making sure everything is torqued. I definitely don't want to miss one. If you missed a valve cover bolt, you would just have an oil leak, and that would suck. You'd have to take it back apart. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take the fender liner out, the wheel well. The AC lines, they're still connected to the compressor. And we got to get the rest of this PCV hose out. It goes back behind the bracket there. We got to disconnect the alternator. We're going to have to take off some pulleys on the front and a bracket on the front to gain access to the PCV tube. Now you're going to take the idler off right there. And the bracket has 2 bolts and 2 nuts. I went ahead and took the alternator off because the AC lines are coming off because I'm doing a compressor. And then zap off that tensioner, and the AC tensioner will stay on with the bracket. That one right there. So now we can see the PCV hose right here. It comes behind the bracket and it mounts to the front of the engine. So there's 2 brackets on it where it bolts up to the front of the engine with the 10 millimeter. And the wiring harness is on the front side of it, and it clips in with Christmas trees.
All right, so you're gonna need to take the compressor off. And there are 2 Christmas trees that attach to that eyelet right there. There's a 10 there and a 10 there. And then this harness attaches to that. So we gotta come through here, and we gotta go in the back side and get the clamp depressed and get the boot off, so we can slip this hose out the front and then put it back on. So the way I came at this was from right here, kind of standing with my left arm under the... So here's the big suspension arm. My left arm was up on this side holding a light like that. And then my right arm came over this way. What I did was I took some long angled pliers, and I was able to reach in at about this angle and pinch the clamp and pull the clamp back enough. Then what I did was I came with a long trim popper. This is like 18 inches long. And then I came between the fitting and the block and the hose and kind of just pushed it out, and I was able to slip it off. So you can see what it looks like. That gives you an idea what it's supposed to look like and what it did look like. So that's why we had a puking leak. I haven't even taken the clamp off of this yet to look at the hose. So there it is right there. There's the oil leak. So you can see the big fat hole in the hose right there. So there's the puking oil leak right there. Now putting this back in, that's going to be a lot more difficult because I can't get in there to push this on. So that's the next task. So the 2 retainers on the front of the engine for the PCV hose, the bottom one looks like this. This does not work with the situation that we have. We have to take this off and you have to take that off and put this one on. The top one is correct because this one, first of all, the hole is too small in the other one, but it doesn't have the opening for the Christmas tree on the harness to attach to. And you have to do that, otherwise the harness will hit. So to get this on, what I did was I fished it through, I lubed it up, I came over through here, and I was able to grab it with some long needle nose pliers and slide it on. And then I just took the same pliers that I had and I just depressed the clamp, and then it popped the lock loose, and then here we are. And now we're attached. So now we need to put those 2 bolts back in the front of the engine to put the hose back where it goes.
Now you want to be more meticulous when you put it back together because you don't want to have to take it back apart. So I've taken my glow plug harnesses and I've cleaned them all up, and I've got those popped in, and they're all nice and sealed the way they should be. I just replaced them a few months ago. I've got the PCV hose in here. All I have to do is put a nut on there, and then you got to connect your glow plug connector. So next step is the glow plug module bracket. So what I do is I lay it in place. I start the 2 8s in the front. I start the 8 right here through the hose, and then I put the bolt with the stud on the back. I tighten it down, and then I tighten the other 3. So after I get the bracket bolted in, I go ahead and put this heat shield for the glow plug module on, and I get the captured nut. Oh wait, before you do that, make sure you put your ground on and tighten it down. Then you put your heat shield on, put the retainer on, put your glow plug module in. The reason I put this on first, it's easier with the module out. So then you're going to put your module on. You're going to connect your EGT sensor back here, get it clipped on the bracket so you don't forget. Connect your glow plug module and tighten down the nuts. So once you get all that done, the PCV hose should look something like this right here. Now I strongly recommend if you're replacing this hose that you replace the separator. What happens is oil separators go bad, and then it just passes oil right through. So make sure that you clip your glow plug connector on, your glow plug harness on right there. Make sure your glow plug harness is clipped in, and make sure all of your seals for each one of your glow plugs are in all the way. Because if you don't have them in all the way, then you'll have a leak from the glow plug hole. So when you put your bracket on, I initially took the alternator off of the bracket before I took the bracket off. But to put it back on, I put the alternator on the bracket. I slid the bracket on the studs like 2 inches, and then that way I could connect the B positive and the connector for the alternator. You can do it with it all the way up. It's just easier to do it if you only have it slid on the studs a couple inches. Make sure the PCV hose is routed correctly. So after you get your alternator bracket bolted up and all connected, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to put your AC belt on. Now I left the AC belt tensioner on the bracket, but I took the primary belt tensioner off so I had more access to the AC belt tensioner because it's right there. So put the AC belt on and get that all set, and then put your tensioner back on. So if you're going to replace the oil separator, there's the part number right there. So for these kind of hoses, just like I talked about with the upper radiator hose, what I do is I take a bit of Sil Glide and I run it around the O-ring on the inside. You can get seal kits for it, but you still need to lube up the O-rings before you connect them. And don't forget to put the clip back on the hose right now before you put the degas bottle in. Then we're going to get ready to put the fuel cooler on. Go ahead and clean up those connections. Make sure you spin the back pressure sensor back towards the firewall. Remember it was down low for the valve cover. So spin that back up. Make sure you get your glow plug harness in on this side. When you fill cooling systems, especially diesels and hybrids, you should use a vacuum refiller. So here I got it all set up. I got it in the coolant, flip the lever, and we fill. So when you're putting this thing back together, you don't want to put the rear banjo in because you're going to put your fuel bleeder in there. I have another video on how to bleed these. But anyways, you're going to run it in. You're going to run it into a jug of coolant or an empty bottle. You're going to turn the key on, and it's going to bubble up. You're going to see bubbles running through the system. As you can see right there, you got the bubbles. You're going to do that, and then you're going to fire it up.
So after you turn the key on, you're going to see a bunch of air bubbles running through the hose, and you're going to do this about 3 or 4 times. You'll start to see less and less air bubbles. You're still going to see bubbles. They'll never be completely gone. So while your bleeder is still hooked up, turn the key, let it fire up. let it run for about 30 seconds, disconnect it, unhook your bleeder tool, and put your banjo back in the fuel hose, and should start right up and have no issues. So now that you've seen this video, you should feel pretty confident replacing this PCV hose and doing the valve covers, and also trying to figure out what that puking oil leak is on the passenger side of your engine. Thanks for watching the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, you get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.